Welcome to the Tech Panel.
1, 2, 3, 4.
The podcast where tech minds meet.
All right. Welcome to the Tech Panel, where we dive into the realms of technology, leadership, and market innovations. I'm your host, James Arvin, and this is Jamie.
I'm Jamie. Hi.
And we're set to explore the fascinating journey of a leader who has transitioned from a military discipline to corporate strategy, driving significant technological advances in multiple sectors. Joining us today is Kit Kyte, the Chief Executive Officer of Checkit. Kit brings a wealth of experience from his time serving as an Army officer to leading CEO, where he now focuses on transforming business operations through strategic use of data and SaaS solutions. Kit, welcome to the show. How you doing, mate?
I'm doing very well, thanks. Yeah. How are you guys? Evening time for you, yeah?
Yeah, it's just on 6 p.m.
Oh, that's not too bad.
Yeah.
No, not too bad.
No, it's totally fine. As I fall asleep.
Yeah. Coffee.
What time is it? Is it for you there?
It is just coming up to 9 a.m., so it's a very respectable time in London.
Okay, so we've done good then on the timing with you.
Yeah, you did it
Nice.
well.
Yeah.
Just two people from the UK now.
Yeah.
And two people both with military backgrounds as well.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll start there. Kit, we interviewed another leader coming from a military background who transitioned into his industry. You've had a similar path where you've moved from a role as an Army officer to taking on leadership roles across various sectors, and now obviously the CEO at Checkit. Can you share a bit about that journey? How did you make it from military into a distinctly different industry and ultimately being a leader of that organization?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I think from my perspective, what was interesting was, look, I was coming up for 30 at the time, and I'd been in the military unit I was serving, which is one of the elite units in the British Army, for about 7 years. A lot of combat operations, and basically the logic was, I think I maybe tapped out in terms of adventure in that sphere, and also, am I going to make it to 40? Unlikely at that point. And so I wanted to make the transition into something that would never quite be as exciting or as adrenaline fueled, but would certainly offer a lot of challenges. And there's so many similarities between the kind of cut and thrust of the business world, especially when you're running a business. There's that, every week there's a new ambush, there's a new thing to confront. So for me, I just had to reorient myself towards moving into business. In practical terms, what that meant was, I had to adopt quite a humble attitude. I think that's the right attitude to have. So I went to business school. So I did an MBA at London Business School, which is one of the sort of Ivy League schools. And the logic there was very simple. I was like, I should assume I know nothing now. There's nothing from my prior experience that's helpful. We can come on to that later, because I think there's a lot that then comes up. But in terms of the numbers, understanding a P&L, just sort of business strategy, I put myself back in the mix with a bunch of investment bankers and traders, and all strategy consultants, all these kind of people. And by the end of that course, I understood their language. I then realized that they were mostly bluffing. And
Yeah.
was able to put myself back at the front and have a good go at things. So that's how it came about.
Okay, so you joined Checkit in 2021, is that correct?
That's right. Yeah. Beginning of 20.
And then from that point, you spearheaded it into the transition of a pure SaaS platform. So what complications and challenges did you have come up during that process, and how did you overcome those?
Yeah. So check it. The reason, when we say a pure SaaS platform, what we really mean is turning all of the customer contracts onto a recurring revenue subscription model, basically, is what that means. So, investors, the marketplace, business owners, shareholders love SaaS, quote unquote, because it's effective recurring revenue. It goes on to infinity in the future unless someone breaks the contract term. It's sticky. It gives lots of future forecastability of revenue streams and profits. And so it attracts a higher multiple, blah, blah, blah. This is what makes tech firms so valuable, basically. And our business was, at the time, sort of 50% recurring revenue and about 50% what we'd call non-recurring revenue. So there was a lot of work that was project based. It was there was actually a separate division in the business where there was a lot of projects going on and relatively low margin. And so what the two challenges I had to take on, one was effectively make a frank assessment of that particular business unit, realize that it was not very profitable. Also, it was non-core, core being the SaaS recurring revenue subscription business.
Yeah.
So effectively, we wound down the non-recurring revenue business, spun it off. So then what you're left with was actually at the time, sort of an overall company where we reduced the revenue base, but we made it entirely based on recurring revenues and subscription revenues. And then what we did over the last few years is we sort of quite significantly scaled up the SaaS IoT part of the business. All contracts, well, 95% of the revenue base is now on a recurring revenue subscription model. So it's kind of pure SaaS footing with high gross margins. And that was the transformation. But it was, it was quite painful because we actually made that decision. We executed against it just at the end of 21, which was the end of COVID, but it was also kind of the end of the most recent tech bubble. And so, it's quite, I had one investor say to me, American investor say, that's quite a ballsy move, but they were quite happy with the outcome because looking back at it now, 3 years later, you've now got a very clean, high margin, almost entire recurring revenue subscription business that is all geared up around a SaaS execution. And so it was absolutely worth doing. But there was certainly some pain at the start to get that thing moving.
Do you think diverting from having two split revenue streams to the organization down to a single purpose, sort of that clarity of purpose, let's call it, was the direct result that led to driving increased revenue across that division? Well, we'll call it the core at that point in time. Maybe a better question to ask here is, do you think the reason why you weren't able to increase the revenue stream was just because you were splitting the strategy across the company and having everything focused on one core area allowed you to grow the business exponentially more?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's just all about focus and clarity, isn't it? And I've rarely come across a situation where not being focused and being spread too thin is a good thing, be that in a military context or a business context, right? So I just think that in this situation, ours is a bit, we're a couple hundred people in the business, 250. At that time, there was, a component of people that were focused on bunch of activities and revenue streams that were not really supportive of the main effort of the business. And then that also takes management bandwidth, right? And then it takes resourcing, et cetera, et cetera. And it's just non-additive. It's not necessarily pulling in the same direction. So effectively, it's short-term pain for mid to long-term gain.
Yeah.
And by bringing about just pure clarity, pure focus, a very straightforward, simple goal, this entire business is a subscription SaaS recurring revenue model. Everything that exists inside the business is to support the main effort of delivering that. Then allows for the oxygen to be created and the creativity to be created to then take the next question on, which is, and how do we then scale that exponentially? How do we start to really turbocharge growth there as well? And that just made for a much cleaner business. Simple as that. You have to make some hard decisions because effectively we let some people go there, but it was actually in service of the broader effort, and it was actually better for the company. So when people ask, and I'm sure you might ask, how do you make those types of decisions? And then they're hard, and it's like, look, these aren't personal decisions; it's a business decision, and actually, it's the entire business that benefits from a decision like this, even if it might have some short-term pain for isolated individuals or parts of an operation.
I mean, I think the reality of all of us have to accept at some stage is if the business suffers and it goes down, then everyone loses.
Yeah.
You have to make a decision at some stage where you're going to have to cut some people go for the better of the whole. Maybe this is a good point to transition into explaining what exactly Checkit is and the service that it offers to the industry.
Yeah. So Checkit is effectively like a data activation platform for large operations inside big blue chip enterprises.
Can you
Okay,
expand a little bit on data activation?
yes. So the world that we typically operate in, when you're looking at a big blue chip organization, let's use BP as an example, or let's use the NHS in the UK, which is the National Health Service.
Yep.
We do a lot of work with a bunch of hospitals. They have large operational footprints, meaning people, places, as in buildings, infrastructure, and assets, critical assets. So things that might keep vaccines stored at very specific temperatures, or blood, or food, or inventory product. So those are the three things that comprise the operations of these large blue chip organizations. And they also have a lot of people, humans, doing work. Okay. And the reason why the way that our platform acts as a data activation platform is that before you put in a Checkit system, there is no data available around the telemetry of the critical assets, the way they're performing, are they in ranges, outside of ranges, what environmental effects might be targeting them that might produce energy wastage or inventory wastage. Typically there's no digitization of the work that the human workers are doing, right? They're actually running around with clipboards, pen and paper.
Yeah.
They might be interacting with like spreadsheets on standalone terminals that nothing's speaking, they're not communicating to each other. So if you're trying to run, hundreds of, let's say, service stations, so BP, in fact, we just finished rolling out in Australia and New Zealand with BP. So every BP service station in Australia now, for example, has the Checkit system in place. But if there's like 400 of them, so and Australia is a very big country. This is a good example. How do you know that all those service stations are operating from a sort of process perspective, people doing the right tasks, products in the right place, brand signage is in the right place, to a standard that is befitting of that organization? How do you know that the KPI is being met? And so that's how Checkit delivers it. So we've effectively got two aspects of the platform, or two pillars that feed data into that platform. One is the Internet of Things, sort of kind of sophisticated Internet of Things sensor suite. So where you've got a critical asset that could be monitored by a device rather than a human, it is. So you put tiny little sensors inside machines or critical assets that will then provide continuous monitoring and throw off data around the telemetry of a critical asset. That's one side of the data that's flowing into the platform. The other side then is people that are operating in those built environments. How do you know that they're doing their work? How do they do simultaneous work? How do they share tasks? How do they capture evidence of things that are broken? And how do they send them up? And how do they ensure inventory levels and compliance checks have happened? So they do that through a digitized tool, like a workflow tool that we provide them, that sits in their hand on an iPad or an iPhone or whatever. So those are your two pillars. And then they're both throwing off data that sit in the cloud on the platform, which we can then put things like ML and AI modules on top of to then provide enhanced insights and ROI. And so as an operational leader, so if you're a regional manager and you've got 100 of these locations that you need to have an understanding of how they're working, you just go into the platform and you can see all the data in real time, and it's presented in the form of dashboarding and insights. And it then saves you having to fly around on planes to go visit every location, never quite knowing who's doing what, fleets of people doing field inspections. That's all removed. So it's just a straight bottom line cost saving to the business.
So if we could summarize, I believe you called it data activation. Is that correct?
Yeah.
That process would be the methodology of putting sensors across a wide range of systems. We'll use servos in this example that are able to listen and look at what's occurring across all these disparate locations and feed it back into a centralized location so you can have an understanding of how they're performing regardless of where you're at in the world.
Yeah, exactly right. And you can see in real time at any point how those assets and how those people are performing when you're in the business of running as efficient an operation as possible. I want to have the least number of people doing the most amount of work, and I want to have all of my machines and assets monitored in real time so that nothing goes down and I can always serve product or whatever it's going to be.
I'm trying to imagine this. Your system is a SaaS solution, obviously, but when I think of sensors, my mind goes straight to hardware. Is that something that you provide as well to these personnel? Yeah,
it is. This is the interesting dichotomy with our business, because everything is sold on a SaaS model. The sensors, the IT is actual hardware, right?
Yeah.
it's no different to Apple. If you look at Apple as a company, right?
Mhm.
They've got devices, they've got the cloud, they've got everything else that goes with it. So yeah, we sell the IoT as part of a recurring revenue bundle, which actually is quite attractive for our customers because effectively we guarantee the sort of telemetry reporting that comes from it, but we also will do things like swap outs and calibrations of IoT fleets over time, and they effectively pay us a permanent lease that just goes on and on and on to the future. But actually, again, if going back to the data activation component, the platform that's built that everything's feeding into is set up. It's sort of open API framework. So it's set up to be able to ingest data feeds from any number of third-party providers, right? So it could be we go into some other location. They've got a whole range of different assets already being monitored by something, and actually they're saying, can you take the feed, ingest the feed into your platform alongside, say, the workflow that the people might do alongside some of your own IT, and can you then pass sense from an operation? Can you then pass the data into one, to a meaningful set of insights for us? So that's really the direction that the business then takes organizations.
I'm trying to imagine from a scalability perspective, this has got to be a monumental task. I mean, a quick browse of your website, and I'm seeing here that these devices track your temperature, ambient humidity, differential pressure, leaks, and literally it says much, much more. Right?
Yeah.
How do you define which direction the business is going to go? Is this something that you are sort of sitting down with a group of people and saying, okay, we're about to break into a different industry? And I imagine there's many that you're already tinkering with right now. How do you triage the direction of a business that needs to service both a hardware solution and a software solution?
Yeah. Well, look, I think there's part of it goes back to focus and clarity. We effectively consider ourselves to be experts in the provision of operational excellence. So if you're in the business of trying to drive operational excellence into your enterprise within operations, then you're going to need a solution that can cover a couple of areas. Like one, as I said, you've got the sort of fixed environment that's going to need automated monitoring. So that's how you solve for that, using some form of IoT that's doing telemetry. And the other part is the human piece. You've got to digitize that.
Yep.
And the main Checkit differentiator is the fact that the two products are seamlessly integrated together. So they throw off not just data into the platform, but also they pass actions and tasks between human and machine effectively. So when something goes down, let's say a machine has gone down, it would trigger remediation action that immediately props up on someone's device, and they can then be guided through what they need to do in order to get it back into serviceability. So with that in mind, we're quite focused about where we play at the moment. So we do a lot of work in the healthcare space. That's about 50% of our revenues, actually. Healthcare being hospitals, being blood plasma providers, care homes, this kind of thing. And then about 30% comes from retail, the retail space. So then mostly think food retail. So think of large restaurant groups, the large supermarket, grocery providers, where we have quite a few brand name customers. And then the remainder is coming from, say, hospitality providers. So we're quite focused really around the use cases that the product can solve for, because we can't do everything to anyone. That's just not the case. We're very focused around where we play, the specific buying centers that we play in. And I think, therefore, to your question of how do you coordinate that from a sort of business execution perspective? If that's your North Star, and if you know that ultimately that the highest person in the food chain is the COO and probably the CFO in terms of signing off on these types of contract, then any path that leads towards that direction is the right path. And anything that's left and right of that is something we just choose to ignore. And it's a somewhat fragmented space. There aren't yet an enormous player. Microsoft hasn't really entered this space properly, which is good for us, so we can keep scaling and taking up territory. But that's how we do it. And then when we think about what comes next, for us, it's all about, once you've figured out how to activate data, so you've actually produced data into the platform, increasingly going forward, it will just be, what can you then do with the data that provides better ROI impact for our customers?
And what's on the forecast now for the organization? If where we're at right now, and we think about the past, it was transitioning into a full SaaS operation. And now you've got your core markets that you want to focus on. what's the next big adventure for Checkit at this stage? What's on the roadmap?
Yeah, I think there's probably two things that we're quite interested in. We actually just released a really interesting AI module called Asset Intelligence a couple of months ago, and that I think is a really good indicator of the future for us. So more and more modules like it. What does Asset Intelligence do? Effectively, it provides predictive analytics around very targeted around which assets, critical assets inside a large organization are going to fail with precision before they fail. So then of course you're able to minimize stock loss or inventory loss, maximize uptime, so therefore revenue. And so that's intervention number one. The other intervention that Asset Intelligence allows organizations to do is around energy management and ESG reporting. So again, to bring this to life, there's a big supermarket chain in the UK called Morrison's. And it sounds really dull, but apparently this is a thing that has a meaningful bottom line impact. They released a month ago, there's a big press story saying they're on their project -15. And what that really means is they've got a big private equity owner. And PE is all about squeezing the juice out of their assets. And they've looked across, Morrison's has got, 1,000 different supermarkets across the UK and into Western Europe. And they've said, look, if all of our fridges and freezers and assets are at -18 degrees C, if we can take them all to -15 degrees C and know that they stay at -15 degrees C permanently, it's a material bottom line saving for the business. This is now a business-wide intervention. And so the asset intelligence module that we have built can specifically help an organization know that is the case, but actually prove that all of their assets across the entire range are no colder than a certain temperature range, and then quantify the savings from an energy perspective that they then get. So that's a really interesting. So when I think about what makes that interesting, it's brilliant because you're not only able to evidence exactly the bottom line savings you're making, but a lot of organizations are trying to demonstrate their ESG credentials. And the problem they come up against is how do you actually evidence what you're doing from an ESG perspective, like in the data? And so again, this is something that helps them do that. So again, the future of Checkit, I think, continues to be how you can best exploit the data the vast amounts of data that's being thrown off into really usable kind of almost Lego bricks of like ROI for an organization. So we see more modules of this range coming out. I think the other thing that we look at is targeted M&A. So as we continue to try and scale up into space, we're one of the bigger companies in this industry. If we can do bolt-on acquisitions that fuel that growth, we're quite present in the US now. That's more than a quarter of our revenue base. So again, targeting the US market is always attractive because it's huge. So that I think that looks like the near term for us.
AI is a big buzzword in a lot of the conversations that were happening over here.
Yeah.
When I think back on some of the conversations we have, we've got essentially two different camps. You've got people that love it and embrace it, and then you've got the other people that are on the other side that are thinking, pump the brakes.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I trust this thing right now, and it's risky rolling out as a business initiative. How did you evaluate that, especially given the fact that I think GPT and some of the other ones, even though they're market-based solutions right now, are still in, I think what we'd call them as open beta.
Yeah.
We're kind of testing these things. It seems like most of the people are using these models as well.
Yeah.
When you were choosing to use one of these systems, what gave you the confidence that you were ready to take on this thing and roll it out across the entire organization as a product?
Yeah, it's quite interesting that the way I put a lens around that is to say, so our business, what gives us confidence around the future proofing of our business as it relates to AI? Because the big risk with AI actually is that it's going to just obliterate so many business models. Because I don't know, I'm a law firm. I don't need all these associates just crunching like word. I just shove it through the machine. I'm now a law firm that's got 2 partners and no one else, right? So it's that kind of problem. And I think a lot of these quote unquote knowledge worker solutions, right? So you can think of a Salesforce or an SAP or anything like this, are at some form of risk potential, right? And so obviously they're really trying to incorporate it inside their system. so that it becomes not so risky for them. Because of course it can just be obliterated. Where we play, if you understand what we're doing, it's focused so much more on what we call the deskless workers. So it's all these frontline workers who are not going anywhere anytime soon, right? We haven't. The interesting thing about AI is that it can destroy knowledge work, but it's not nearly as advanced when it comes to practical work, right? So people that are in the hospitals, nurses, doctors, etc., running around doing stuff are going to be here for some time. Yeah. So for us, the core tenets of our solution are somewhat future-proof from the kind of, will it destroy the business model? Then the next question becomes, okay, so how is it an enhancement or a complement to the business? Which I think is getting to the question you're talking about. So for us, we do see clear areas of gain. I think there's two. You've got the internal gain. So what can I do that's going to boost productivity inside the business? So we actually have an ongoing, what we call a strategic initiative that is seeking to incorporate the best practice and learnings that's coming out of the tools that are being put into the market inside the business. So, from a code development, software development perspective, where do we no longer need to be wasting time and effort when we can have a tool that's going to help boost performance there? So how do we incorporate that? Small examples. Well, from a sales perspective, there's oftentimes RFPs and tenders and they always ask very similar sets of questions. And it's in the past, it's painstaking effort of once again regurgitating most of the information and then tweaking it a bit, right? So we actually used a GPT to build a kind of RFP tool that ingested, the previous 10 best responses that we had provided in a space to then be able to produce a 85, 90% complete answer in like 3 minutes.
Yeah.
Such that teams only spend like the remaining time on the last 10% that polishes up and tailors it to become a winning answer, right? Yep. So that's just a huge sort of efficiency boost inside the business. So for us, that's how we've been incorporating it. It's on a very targeted basis. We had our lawyer, our general counsel, we had to sort of produce effectively like an AI policy, like regulation policy inside the business. Because we got, this is about a year or so ago we did this because we recognized that this thing was going to go like wildfire. And I don't want people inside the business chucking proprietary information into a tool online.
That's a big risk too. Like for any sort of corporation or that's a proper risk that people do have to evaluate.
Yeah. So we very quickly brought out a sort of AI policy so that safeguard, because it's not just our data, but it's also potentially customers' data, and it's just a lot of stuff is potentially at risk here, and we're not entirely sure where that data goes, right? So we just need to be careful about it. So that's what we've done, and we're kind of quite targeting what we do. And then really from a product perspective, the question becomes, what can we take? It's brilliant actually from a future product development perspective, because this, more often than not, the question to ask is, do we need to build it? Do we actually need to build it? Or is there something that's out there that's already better that we can then integrate into the ecosystem? And actually, do we move more into this kind of orchestrator of capabilities that create a whole that's actually differentiated, rather than specifically building the latest tool when someone out there is probably doing it better and quicker, and we can just stick it inside the product?
Yeah. I guess sort of like I can't actually believe that we're already sort of just over halfway through our chat with you. But since you've been at Checkit, so there's been significant changes that you have been at the lead of. So going to the SaaS, implementing the AI, whatnot. What was there one or a couple of like big challenges that came into play with these processes and the changing of these strategies? And if so, how did you overcome that and then lead your team through that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think we touched on the challenges of winding down business units and gaining clarity and focus. I think the other thing is we've done a bit of M&A over the last few years.
Sorry, I always got random listeners that are saying, "What is that? What is an M&A for us?"
Yes, mergers and acquisitions. So effectively, we've acquired some businesses, that's tricky when basically whenever you do the data will show you that more often than not, M&A is not always that successful. It looks good. It all looks good on the outside. Yeah, we've boosted scale and we've got this new product capability and
Yeah.
blah blah blah. But the trick that what we've learned, at least for ourselves, is the trick to actually successfully doing M&A is how well you integrate it inside the business and how well you execute against that. So, and the difference between doing that right and doing that wrong is significant, because if you pay lip service to properly integrating an acquired asset, the people, the processes, the technology, getting your hands around the customer base, the product, making sure that you've understood the gaps and what needs to be resourced, all that stuff. If you then execute against a very specific timeline on this, then things go wayward, they drift, and you see it, time and time again, like an acquired business is still just calling itself by its previous name. Its offices still have, branding. They don't really consider themselves part of the bigger entity. Then you get cultural teamwork problems, and we've actually experienced this as well. We've gone through the hard yards of that, and so I'd say the single biggest challenge is when you're doing that, because to then really sweat the juice out of what you've done, it's a lot of effort goes into acquiring a business. You don't then want to waste it because you don't properly integrate it, get people on board with the culture. This comes back to clarity of purpose, clarity of vision, leading people through change. All this, sometimes when you make that change, you have to make some hard decisions around who stays and who doesn't stay, all of that. And getting it wrong I've seen there's quite a few businesses where you'll see stories of, we made this great big M&A, it was all great, and then 3-4 years later, we've basically wound down or exited the deal that we made. And it's just a complete waste of time, effort, and money and resources.
Everything.
They eventually say, "Oh, it wasn't as good as we thought, and we didn't really integrate it properly, and revenue started going down quite quickly. Before we knew it, we just ended up having to make a decision to just kill the thing off." And so, I think that's a big thing to get right.
I've seen companies build their entire strategy around how poorly their biggest competitor integrated something that they acquired. And their model was, no, just go ahead, talk to them, ask them about using this particular piece of software that they have. See how they report simultaneously. They don't, fair warning. And then they just create that seed of doubt, and, the customer experience just plummets and the reputation sinks as a result as well. So I think you're right. There's a great amount of risk associated with just doing an M&A. There's a lot of things you need to take into consideration. So I could definitely sometimes see where you're coming from in that regard. I want to drill into this one last time on the GPT or AI front in particular.
Yes.
Would you say your company is a pro AI in organization, or is it still one of those things you feel needs to be slowed down and probably just pump the brakes in general around releasing these within the organization? Or are you just like, I'm using it all the time, it's great?
No, we can be very clear about that. We're absolutely pro AI. And not just in ourselves building out the most relevant ML AI modules for our own customers that are, points of difference and drive good benefits. But I'm personally pro AI with some limitations, but pro AI. We've been running a very big initiative inside the business to effectively AI equip everybody. We've been doing that for, actually, it's probably a year and a half, maybe longer now, since we very quickly cottoned on to what was happening. And we figured, look, we're still sufficiently small, couple hundred, 250 people, something like this, that we're agile enough to embrace this inside the organization quickly and then boost scale as a result. And I just don't think, from my mind, I just don't think you have a choice. It's a bit like it's a bit like when the Industrial Revolution was coming in, and they were automating the printing press, and they were getting this steam-powered railway, and you had the Luddite movement, and people were trying to trash the printing press so they could still manually produce books, but not at scale. There is an inevitability around this, right? It's out of the box. It's not going back in the box. So I think then you need to. Why ignore it? Why pump the brakes? You have to get fully on top of it, but you want to, like we did, we put regulation in place inside the business. But effectively, the mindset is, if I can use the benefits of AI inside the business to enhance productivity, to remove waste and just, mundane tasks that take up talented people's effort and have them only focus on higher value activities, then my business is going to get better as a result. No question about it. And if I can then consider how I can incorporate best of breed GPTs, there's a GPT engine that we've built actually around our task management platform, which is so easy to do. And the way the team built it, just they effectively, to prove how easy it was, they effectively recorded someone cooking something, right? Just said, look, just all I'm going to do is just going to use our own task management to record someone preparing a meal. Yeah. And then I'll then ask the GPT, which we built sort of tailored to our own business, and said, just based upon what you've seen, turn this into a digital workflow that can be, scaled up across an organization. And it just did it in like 3 minutes with all the necessary instructions, prompts, tasks, checkpoints inside our system. So previously, even we would have had to have, we've got a very low code platform. You configure the blocks inside our platform to build that process, but now you can just film it and then have it turned into a process that's probably 95% accurate. And that again is a huge enhancement, right? So this becomes a point of difference for our business. So yes, I think you can tell from the way I'm talking about this that we're pro.
Yeah. And I'm glad to hear that, honestly. I think it's important for most businesses out there to figure out a way to adapt and adopt in particular.
And I think the ones that don't are going to be the ones that are left behind.
I 100% agree with you.
They're in trouble.
They are.
Yeah.
They are. And you raise a good point. I think it's the most common kickback I hear from people when I have these conversations is, I'm worried that this is going to eliminate all these jobs and put people out of home. But I think this is the same thing that we need to remember. It's just like you said with the printing press.
Yeah.
You got rid of these people that were making books in a slow manner, but you created hundreds of new jobs around managing these new pieces of high-tech equipment that require all these other new people. They require new training. They require new education systems, new paradigms, and all these other great things that come with it. And I'm more apt to look at these types of models in a similar vein. I suspect that there's going to be new jobs in the future that are like a GPT specialist or an AI specialist in-house that'll be able to, I don't know, maybe look across whatever it is that you put into the system. Maybe they'll just vet that it's accurate or in the right format. I don't know.
Just look at podcasting. This didn't exist 10, 12 years ago.
Exactly right. Exactly.
No offense, but it's you are evidence of an entire, and it's a huge space, right? Yeah. Huge space. It's like a primary platform for everyone from Joe Rogan down. And this just wasn't even a tool, wasn't a capability. We didn't have the integrated functionality of technology. Now, and then think about the ecosystem associated with podcasting. You've got the people that do the editing, everything else. So it's entire industries get built just off the speed of technology.
Exactly right. And the podcasting, like coming from a radio background myself, the podcasting, it scared. It was scary for radios. Like they were, what are we going to do? And do you know what? We've exactly what you just said. All those people that were trained that they had to thin out in radio have taken those skills, they've upskilled them, and they've just put them into the new industry of podcasting. And the same thing is going to happen with AI. Like it is just a natural evolving way of where technology is going, where businesses need to go to keep up.
And I think you raised something as well, Kit. You said, these models are only really designed to enhance your own capabilities. It can't do the job for you. AI only provides you information. It's not actually going to execute on anything. It's not going to click the button for you. It's not going to tell people what they need to do. No.
Not
Why
yet.
are you going to do that? We're on a positive note right now.
Sorry.
So yeah, I think we need to start looking at these things in a more optimistic light. But I'm glad to hear your company's adopting to this technology well, and I strongly suspect this is going to be one of those things that puts you ahead of the curve, especially for some of your competitors out there. Probably going to be
100%.
pumping the brakes a little bit more.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. I actually got really distracted by what we were just doing right there, and I completely forgot what I was going to ask next. Quick, someone play me out.
Well, yeah. You're done. You're out.
That's exactly it.
I guess so, like just sort of feeding back into what we touched on earlier. So you've gone into the SaaS platform, you've gone through your complications and whatnot, that you've led your team, and you've done this in a very short amount of time. I mean, it's 3 years. 3 years.
Yeah, about 3.5 years. Yeah.
Yeah. So what would be your biggest takeaway from what you have sort of overcome and learned and pushed onto the company and the businesses that you're now leading, for people that are listening in that are possibly looking down the barrel of a similar situation where they're looking at, okay, we're acquiring a new company or we're going to be implementing AI because that's something that we need to do, or going into SaaS? Like, what are these big things that you would, as a takeaway, give to other business leaders that would be really beneficial from your experience and what you've learned from that process?
Yeah, it's a really good question, actually. I think there's two things. One, as soon as you start to think about what needs to happen, then as soon as it's actually entered your mind and you realize change is required,
Mm-hmm.
then you're already, the clock is already ticking, right? And so what I mean there is having a bias to action cannot be overestimated enough, right? You have to be really, really, really aggressively decisive, actually. And if it feels like you're pushing too hard and you're trying to go too fast, then you're probably still not doing it enough, because the inertia and the rate of change, the amount of energy that's required to enact a pivot or a transformation in an operating model or an embrace of AI, whatever it's going to be, requires really, really focused, highly decisive action. And it has to be not lip service, because if you do lip service, you just sort of half start a thing and then you don't see it through. So for me, it's all about, we have a phrase that we call the say-do gap. And we want the gap between what you say and what you do to be almost minimal. Okay. And so that, I think that's my first piece of advice is, you've really got to like over-index on decisive action, because you kind of already know what it is you need to do. And then people then spend another 6 months procrastinating, not making the hard decision. And so if it feels really hard and painful, it's probably the right decision.
Yeah.
And if it feels a bit easy, then it probably means you're procrastinating. You're actually delaying the hard thing that you need to do. So that's my primary advice, is go as deep as you can into the pain and then be really aggressive with how you.
I love that. I think you're absolutely spot on. Like, absolutely spot on. Because you do procrastinate the hard stuff, so you take the easy road. And I think that's just human nature more often than not, to do that.
There's this brilliant quote actually by this, I think it's like a former Eastern European kind of bodybuilder from like the 60s. And I can't remember his name actually, but he said, what was it? Easy choices, hard life, hard choices, easy life.
Easy. Yeah. Yeah.
That's a good mantra. It's a good template to apply to the thing you're trying to make a decision around.
Yeah, that is good. So I guess, Kit, what are you looking at me like that for?
Oh no, I was going to see what you're going to do next.
Getting some major side eye here. What?
That's how I operate.
I was like, okay, off you go.
No. The question I was going to ask there, I suppose, before we end most of our shows is there any piece of technology that comes to mind that you believe has been pivotal in changing your life for the better, that you're like, this is something I have to tell people about. If they don't start using it now, it's going to keep them back in their life? Does anything come to mind?
Well, I mean, look, there's the simple, I would say anything that is GPT oriented has been quite helpful, right? I mean, let's be honest. If you're not making use of that tool to just enhance your life, we're actually a listed company. And so that means every year we have to produce the annual report, big audit. And it's a huge amount of work for a company of our scale. And you produce a big document that's 100 pages with all the financial information, strategy and product and fucking everything in there. Sorry. Mm-hmm. But actually, if you can get a GPT to go through what the CEO report and the CEO letter and all this kind of stuff. And I can say to them, look, take what I've already written in the prior 3 or 4 years, and I want to inject these themes, these key narratives, and I want you to repurpose this in a way that's, and I'll get something that is 90% accurate to what I want to say for the next one. And then I spend, like always, I'll just spend my focus on the last 5-10%. It's a huge time enabler. And then you can apply this right the way across the business. I think that's been super helpful. But otherwise, I think if I took a step back, I just think that these days, nowadays, you've got to consider how you can use technology to orchestrate, the people, the process, the technology in a continuous fashion, because we do have that ability. I think there used to be loads of silos, right? There were so many silos between systems, all these different systems didn't speak to each other. That was just the standard operating model inside big businesses. SAP doesn't speak to Oracle, and Oracle doesn't do this. And so we'll need to spend, tens of millions bringing in an Accenture to go try and pretend to fix it. And they'll spend years not fixing it. That used to be the world. But I think that world is basically disappearing in front of us. So again, anything where you can use just smart technology that can coordinate and extrapolate data from, just give you one single source of truth, all this kind of stuff, is just a mega point of difference for your business. So I would encourage people to really take a look at that.
Love it. I couldn't have said it any better. People out there, start using AI models.
Yeah. Yeah. I am so pro AI.
Yeah.
I love it.
It's changed my life for the better.
Right?
I can't believe we lived in a world where we spent
Had to
hours or weeks writing up reports.
Right. Yes. Thinking. And now you can sort of be like, right, here's the cliff notes. This is the information that I can give you from another time. Plug it in and boom. Exactly what you said. Spend the most time in the last 5 to 10% that you need to tidy up and fix up. Yeah.
That's all that matters.
Before we wrap up, is there anything else that you'd like to leave for our listeners? Any words of wisdom, or would you like to take the opportunity to plug your company, and where can people find you?
Yeah. I mean, there's no more wisdom for me to give. I wouldn't consider myself that
I feel
wise.
like that's not true.
Mission accomplished.
Oh, you're like mission accomplished. I'm like, what rubbish? You've got more, I'm sure of it.
Yeah, exactly. Oh no, look, I think if there's anyone listening who is a business leader or works in a large blue chip organization, and you're trying to find a way to bring automation and digital into your business operations, then you can look us up. It's Checkit. Find us on www.checkit.net. We're easy to find and happy to help. We do work with, some of the biggest names globally, like the BP and the NHS, Waitrose, John Lewis, Sainsbury's, etc. So we know how to work with big enterprises and bring value. So that's all I'd say. And hit me up or hit the team up, and we'll be happy to help.
Perfect.
Kit, it has been brilliant. It's
been a pleasure, mate.
Yeah, it really has. This has flown by.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And really appreciate everything coming onto the panel and giving us your words of wisdom that you think you've tapped out of, but I know there's more in there.
Whatever. I scraped the barrel.
You didn't. You didn't. You did not. I don't believe a word you're saying. All right. Thanks so much.
Have a wonderful rest of your night, mate, or morning.
Yeah, thanks. Take it easy, guys. Thank you. Bye.
Catch you, Kit. Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to the Tech Panel. If you like what you heard, make sure to subscribe on YouTube and follow us on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn to stay connected. A big thank you to our major sponsor, SmoothLink Integrations, for powering today's episode. And join us again on the next episode of the Tech Panel, where tech minds meet.